Good evening. I, Phil McNeely, President of the Duncanville Independent School District Board of Trustees, call this meeting of the Duncanville Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that the meeting has been duly called and the notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Our mission in Duncanville at Duncanville ISD is to engage, equip, and empower all scholars to achieve their unique potential. We will now enter into our opening ceremonies. Trustee Veracruz, would you lead us in prayer, please?
I will. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. If you would just bow your head for a word of prayer. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing over this meeting. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would show us how to conduct our work with the spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. I pray for a period of rest and reflection for students, educators, leadership teams, and the Board of 8 during this summer season. I pray that we challenge each other to reach higher and farther to be the best we can be and to steward challenges with the light of God in us. In his mighty name, amen.
Amen. Now we will stand for the pledge to the flags.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, Superintendent's report. We'll turn it over to Dr. Smith now.
All right, thank you, Mr. President and board members and those that are in the audience. I have the following items that I would like to present and speak to under the superintendent's report. The first item is a legislative update. The legislative session has ended, and at this point in time, there's been very few education bills that have made it through the process to become an actual law. Yesterday was the last day for the governor to either sign or veto bills, so everything that passed in the regular session is technically now considered law. And later on in the board meeting presentation, I'll be providing some more commentary on that process, and I'll have some specific comments there. Unfortunately, though, the session was not very fruitful or positive for school districts across the state. There were no changes to improve the state accountability system or to allow for virtual education opportunities. It's important to keep in mind the state has a $33 billion surplus, and none of that money at this point in time was used to improve public education or to give teachers raises. The basic allotment of school districts didn't change and was not adjusted for inflation. Monies were not allocated to help teachers with compensation. Neither of these are scenarios that we were wanting as the session began. And so these things are very disappointing as we are, really at the 9th hour, if you will, as we get prepared to adopt our budget and start the school year. The one positive is that we were able to avoid vouchers this particular session. However, the governor has already stated that there will be a series of special sessions on vouchers, on education savings accounts, and a number of other areas. And so there's been a special committee that's been developed to speak to educational opportunities and enrichment associated with education freedom and other areas that the governor has targeted. And so I highly anticipate that both of these will be something that'll be a priority for the governor as we work through the remainder of the summer. Districts, they did receive minimal funding to increase for school safety, but some of the initiatives were not fully funded by the governor, and others are not funded at all. There aren't any allocated funds at all. So it'll be interesting as we monitor what happens over the next several months during the summer to see how that all plays out. I'm going to also speak to some very specifics on this item as well in my opening comments when we begin the budget hearing. One of your priorities, Board, was to encourage the legislature to address House Bill 4545. That was the accelerated instruction program from last session. And so although we weren't fully successful in getting the law repealed, we were able to see some requirements loosened, and that is a good thing for us. For example, only 15 hours of tutorials or tutoring is required versus 30 hours. That's very significant in terms of operationally how we are going to be able to manage that as a school district. And then focusing on math and reading was an area that they provided some relief on, and they included a parent opt-out option. So as more information and policy updates come down the pike, we'll of course be updating the board on that. Although the current session is focusing on property tax and border security, I am hopeful that maybe July, maybe August, at some point, the governor will convene the special session focusing exclusively on school finance, and we'll know more about where we are at that point in time. Again, I do have more specific details that I'll be referencing in the budget hearing here momentarily. But that's the major legislative update that I wanted to share with you at this time. Next item, please. The next item that I wanted to share, we've been working with Kroger and a number of other stores in the area. As you may know, many stores sell Duncanville merchandise, but it wasn't always with our logo. And so we are working to really change that. This fall, the Duncanville Kroger on Wheatland Road will carry Duncanville ISD merchandise. The merchandise will be really good quality. All the designs have been approved by our communications team. And the biggest thing is we will receive an 8% royalty on all purchased items from Kroger. And so we're really excited about that as we work with them and their leadership to make this happen. It's a great partnership. It's going to help with just community engagement. It's going to give us greater access and get our merchandise out there in the community. And then, of course, we as a school district are able to benefit from that.
You mentioned Kroger on Wheatland?
Mm-hmm. Camp Wisdom. Yeah, Camp Wisdom. Sorry about that. Yep. Writing success stories, one student at a time, of course, is our mission, and we had an opportunity to share what that really means to us as we convened our Citizens Facility Advisory Committee. So you'll hear more about this. We do have a report later in the board agenda that goes into greater detail of what we met on at our most recent meeting, but I did want to share a few highlights with you. So we met on Tuesday, May 30th, and the whole purpose was to discuss district needs, consider our next steps toward the bond process. The committee convened at the Teaching and Learning Center for an overview of the district and really outlined the purpose of the bond program. We had an opportunity to take this group on tours around the district, and so we boarded buses and we toured Acton, Central, Daniel, Hardin, and Smith Elementary. And Andre Brackens, who you have become familiar with over the last several months from Huckabee, he shared an overview of our recent facility assessment. It's the facility assessment that we presented to the board last month, but we were able to share that with the citizens group. And then our demographers, who we also presented the information to you, they provided the community, with a demographer's report to help them understand what the enrollment trends are in the district and how that relates to what's going on at our campuses, as well as potential bond opportunities that we'll have. Dr. Bigby, I had him do a financial overview of the district, And then I brought in our financial advisors, and our financial advisor who presented to you a couple of months ago, his name is Josh McGoughlin with the BOK Financial Securities. He gave an update on our bond capacity and helped really define the numbers and the metrics associated with the bond program. We then concluded the day with our district leaders facilitating roundtable discussions. We divided in roundtables across the facility, and there was a table on school choice. There was a table on our career and technology. There was a table on special education. There was a table on early childhood and technology. And the community groups got to go spend time at each table and get an overview of that particular department, learn about it, learn the operations behind it, and ask any questions that they had. And so I want to thank our senior leadership team, the Huckabee team. It was really a great day. I want to send my gratitude out to everyone who took place. And then, of course, thanks to Dr. Halachka and the Huckabee team for a very well executed day. I'm looking forward to showing you visuals later in the board meeting so you can get more detail. But it was really a great day, and I was excited to see the group. They were very engaged, very attentive, and was really a good group to work with. Next slide, please. First, let me say happy Juneteenth to everyone that's here in the audience today and to our board members. Juneteenth commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. On June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston, Texas, with the news that the Civil War was over and that enslaved people were free. While the day has been celebrated ever since, it was first recognized as a federal holiday in 2021. We just want to take a moment and wish everyone a very happy Juneteenth. Been able to see a lot of the festivities that have taken place across the DFW area, and we wanted to take a moment out of our board meeting just to recognize Juneteenth. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, I have just one more item. We had graduation. Y'all remember that? So we had graduation back on May 30th at Globe Life Field, and we always do a brief video to highlight the graduation, and we're going to show that here just a few seconds. It's a short video just to capture some of the highlights. But we graduated just under 1,000 students. 77% of those students applied for college. 39 students earned an industry certification or a post-secondary certificate. We had 45 students earn athletic scholarships, and the class brought in, just out of a little under 1,000 students, over $9 million in scholarship offers. So it was really a great class, 2023, great class, very proud of them. And you know, we are sending them off ready to go and tackle the world. And so we have a brief video that we'll show, and then that'll conclude the superintendent's report.
All the days we've been together, fondly we recall.
I am so very excited. The 2023 class has endured so much, and to make it to this ceremony is a culmination of all of their hard work and their effort. They are truly ready to start this next chapter in their life. And I could not be more proud to be here and participate in this awesome ceremony, and wishing them good speed and a well-do in their future. Congratulations, class of 2023.
Congratulations, class of 2023 and the Duncanville High School Collegiate Academy. You earned your high school diploma in addition to your associate's degree. You've encountered so many changes over the last 4 years, and you've persevered through it all. Congratulations, continue to go be game changers and make your parents and family and community proud.
I know all too well how long we've all been waiting for this moment, and how fast the time really flew by. To my classmates, we made it. As I look out into the crowd, I am extremely proud of every single graduate tonight.
To the class of 2023, going forward, I know many of us have goals and ambitions for our lives. I I believe that we have been given dreams for the purpose of accomplishing those dreams. You have been placed on this earth to change the community around you, and it is not only your duty, but your responsibility to chase after that dream. But for those of you who stay strong, for those of you who stay courageous, for those of you who adapt to your environment and overcome every obstacle placed in front of you, you will not have to yield to the rules of life, but the rules of life will yield to you.
Class of 2023, your hard work, resilience, and dedication has paid off. 4 years ago, you experienced one of the worst pandemics in America. However, you came back to thrive. You came back and established yourself as one of the top classes to ever grace the halls of Duncanville High School. I commend you, I salute you, and tonight is a culmination of all your achievements. So tonight, we celebrate you, class of 23.
All right, thank you. Turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Now we'll move on to recognitions. Mrs. Wallace, please.
Good evening, President McNeely, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Smith. I will start with recognitions. This evening, we are excited to have our choir here with us. So if at this time, if I can invite Mr. Doucet to please join me at the podium. Thank you. So President McNeely, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Smith, Mr. Paul Doucet joined Duncanville High School as the Director of Choral Activities earlier this school year. And recently, he was named Director of Fine Arts for the entire district. So we are super excited and want to congratulate that. And tonight, he is here because we are excited that the Duncanville Choral Department had 6 students represent Duncanville ISD at the Texas Music Educators Association as an all-state musician. 6 students, and they are, and if our students, if you guys will just come on up whenever I call your name, Jeffrey Berry, Zion Fuquay, Marisol Hernandez, Kalisha Zapata, Lyric Lyons, and Evan Beatty. These students were chosen for the prestigious honor through a competitive process held this year across the state at district, region, and area levels. And only 2.6%, did I get that correct? 2.6% of musicians who initially audition actually become all-state musicians. And so we are excited that our students are receiving this honor. Mr. Doucet, would you like to have a few words to share with the board about this great group?
Thank you so much, Board. Our students have worked extremely hard, and this is tantamount to winning state football championship for choir. These students beat out 17,000 students that began the process in August, and we're down to the last 250 in the state. So these students have worked from June 2022 until their last audition, which is the first weekend in January of this year, to become an all-stater. We are so extremely proud of their hard work, tenacity, their stick-to-itiveness that they have brought to this process, and we are so very proud of them.
So if I can invite our board president to join our choir members so that they can have their picture taken with our board president. And if we'll get one more with Mr. Doucet without your badge. Thank you. I usually run over and grab the badge, but I couldn't quite make that sprint. Thank you, guys. But we do have a group of folks who could have made it all the way over there, lickety-split, and they are next up on our agenda. If you'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So if I can invite Coach Green, please join me at the podium. And if her young ladies and coaches will be on deck to be recognized as well. So tonight, as Coach Green joins me up at the podium, so if you guys have been driving along I-20, traveling east, or if you've gone north or south on 67, you've likely seen our young ladies on billboards because for the first time in program history, the Duncanville High School girls track and field team, they clinched the UIL 6A state championship title. I can pause there. And so you guys know Coach Green. She has been their track coach, or the track coach here since 2014, and she has developed the program into one of the most dominant in the state of Texas. And so at this time, I'm going to invite those young ladies up while Coach Green prepares to share a few words. And before they depart, they will receive a resolution from the State of Texas House of Representatives on behalf of Representative Yvonne Davis. She has ensured that the 88th Legislature prepared a resolution specifically for our young ladies that includes their name in it. So what an honor. So I'm going to turn it over to Coach Green to say some words.
Good evening, Board of Directors, everybody in attendance. I am so happy to be standing here in this position. I've stood here before, but I can tell you it definitely feels a little bit different standing here in this position. And to see the girls up there, it kind of shocked me. I wasn't expecting that, so I'm not the most emotional person, but I am deeply moved by this moment, and I am deeply moved to stand here and honor these young ladies and this team before you guys in this manner. The journey to this state championship was absolutely amazing. To sit and to watch it, and now I play it over and over in my head. I don't sleep. It's like I'm watching a movie. But it has been one of the best experiences of my life. And I have been with Duncanville since 2012, and I didn't start off as the head coach. I was an assistant coach, and then I transitioned to the head coach, and definitely tried and put so much of my life and myself into this program. And to see these young ladies here today and to know how much of their lives and their selves that they put into us winning this state championship was absolutely mind-blowing. And so I want to thank each of you. Y'all have always been such a supportive unit for us, the board, our administrative team at the high school, our middle schools, our elementaries. I cannot go anywhere without them supporting us. And the way Duncanville moves blows my mind. From the custodial staff, the security, everybody was on board. We all did it as a unit. We all moved as a unit throughout the whole year. And when I think about it, it was nothing but God. And I'm so happy that I can stand here and say that I literally watched it all happen. And I think about the little things that they would say just throughout the year. It was like they already knew. Everybody already knew. And these young ladies moved in that manner. Not only are they amazing, amazing on the track, they are absolutely talented. And I will tell you a little bit about what we did at the state track meet, but I do want to recognize and let y'all know a little bit about them, which goes beyond athletics. So in this class, we are graduating, in this group of young ladies, we are graduating 3 seniors. We have Miss Kaylee Hill, Miss Kennedy Brown, and Miss India Walton. Those three seniors were recognized by Texas Track and Field, Texas High School Coaches Association for their academics. Okay, they made the all-star team. We had a first teamer, we had a second teamer, we had several other young ladies make honorable mention, but those young ladies were amongst those top groups. Those young ladies, with those three young ladies, we have two of the young ladies who are in the top 1% of the class. They were ranked, they graduated number 4 and 5 at Duncanville High School, which is absolutely amazing. Those three young ladies also all received full scholarships to college. We have one receiving a full scholarship to UNT for track and field, Miss India Walton. We have Miss Kennedy Brown receiving a full academic scholarship to A&T University. And Miss Kaylee Hill received a full academic scholarship to TCU University. And Kaylee's, I hope I don't say this wrong, but Kaylee was top 5 to receive the highest scholarship of that type of honor at TCU. So very, 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 very proud of those young ladies and the bar that they set. That is, to speak to the girls about track and field is easy, but to speak to our team about the precedent of the graduates of the state champions of Duncanville and how they are academically is absolutely mind-blowing. So now I'm going to run down some more, and not just those young ladies. So even though they are our seniors and they are academically absolutely sound, the juniors, academically sound. The sophomores, academically sound. And my freshman is a collegiate baby, so you know she had to make good grades to get in there. So we have been fortunate enough with this group to have we didn't have to worry about them in the classroom. So with that being said, we also had two of the young ladies, Kaylee and Kennedy. They were awarded scholarships from our NMSI STEM Star program. They got scholarships. They didn't even tell me about it. I ended up finding out on Twitter. I was like, you didn't tell your coach? Okay. But congratulations to those young ladies. So again, very, very proud of these young ladies for what they did beyond the track. So now, the state championship run, and I'm so sorry they've done so much, so I'm gonna go through this a little quickly. So they won state with 50 points. 50 points, and that is a lot. It may not sound like a lot, but that is a lot. And if I could just get them to spread out a little bit so y'all can see how mighty but small this group of 7 young ladies is. 7 young ladies, and they won state with 50 points. So we had all 3 relays down there, our 4x1, our 4x2, our 4x4. The 4x1 took 2nd place, the 4x2 took 2nd place, and the 4x4 took 4th place. We also had Miss India Walton down there who made it in 2 individuals, which is absolutely amazing. She made it in both hurdles, the 100-meter hurdles and the 100s and the 300 hurdles. India ended up taking 4th in the 100, and then in the 300s, she fought to get on that podium, and she ended up getting 3rd place. So all around the ladies, I always tell them we have to go down there and we have to come back with hardware. And while I love hardware, there was nothing like bringing baby home, that big trophy. And she is home. So I'm so proud of what they did on the track. And a lot of people are talking about what happened. Everybody, it was like this whole story to them. And I talked about it in an interview that we did on Mile Split. And in my head, I had played out the evolution of the Panther. From beginning to end, I watched them evolve and how they moved, not only throughout their 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, and the freshman who's only been with us this year, but to watch them evolve into the great Panthers that they will be when they graduate, Duncanville was nothing short of amazing. And to see it from the time they stepped out there, they came down from the hotel, and I knew it. I said, look, I just said, oh, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And so they moved with that precision, and they all moved as a unit. I am one of those people who I think Duncanville can never be stopped if we move as a unit. We are so strong as a team. And I watched this team of girls come together, and they came together individually without us holding their hands, without us being there. They moved together as a unit. And we were so proud to see them. And so they did this, and they went through one relay, and they locked back in to the second, and they locked back in, and they did not stop. They did not stop until the meet was over. And I'm one of those people who you have to run through the finish line, and they did just that. So congratulations to this group. I cannot say enough about these young ladies, but I am going to stop. I do have to say this, though. The coaching staff. I have Coach Square, he's been with me the longest, Coach Williams, Coach James, and Coach Duran. I am forever, forever grateful for what y'all did for this program and for these young ladies. The sacrifices that coaches have to make is beyond anything that you can imagine, because we often give up time with our families for other kids and other people's families. But we do it wholeheartedly and love it. And so to the coaches and to the young ladies and to Duncanville, I am so proud to be here, and I'm so grateful, and thank all of you for everything that you did to help us win this state title for Duncanville. Thank you so much.
And if you guys will hold that pose once we get you situated so that our parents can also get some snaps of you as well. Parents, be on deck if you want some of these pictures. All right, one more round of applause for this great group. Thank you, Coach Green, and thank you to our track team. You guys, when we break for closed session, we have the resolutions for you, and then you see these beautiful awards over here that Coach Green also has for the young ladies. So thank you to Coach Green, to our coaches, and to our young ladies. And now if we can move to the donation slide. Next slide, please. All right, so President McNeely, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Smith, once again, our community has shown up and showed out in terms of donations that we have received. And so this month we have $10,000 that has been donated to our football program, and $2,370 that has been donated to our Panther Pantry. And so we are grateful to our community for their continued support. Are there any questions about the donations that we have received? Okay, hearing none. Okay, thank you.
We're going to do the swearing in of the officer before we go back.
Chief Lambert, you're up.
President McNeely, Madam President, Superintendent, it's hard to follow Coach Green. I wasn't nervous till after she went up. In a profession that everyone seems to be leaving, it's very nice that we have a young lady in our community that rose her hand and she said, I would do it. I'm very proud. This is a very proud day for me, a very proud day for this district and this police department. Please welcome Officer Kylie Young. Miss Young is a mother of a handsome 8-year-old boy named Mason and a sassy 2-year-old named Madison. Hopefully she wasn't listening. Miss Young graduated from Duncanville High School in 2008 before obtaining her bachelor's degree in 2012 from Prairie View A&M University, where she majored in criminal justice. She graduated from Cedar Valley Law Enforcement Academy in January 2022. Miss Young has worked as a police officer for 8 months at the Richland Police Department. Miss Young describes herself as a people person. She loves meeting new people and learning about their lives and backgrounds. Miss Young can almost always find common ground with strangers and make people feel comfortable in her presence. And a fun fact is that she was born on Valentine's Day. If you come right here, we'd swear. Raise your right hand for me. I, Kylie Young, do solemnly swear that have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, or promised to pay, contributed, or promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election of which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment, or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome aboard. We will now move into closed session. Okay, call the meeting back to order as we come out of closed session. We will now conduct a public hearing to allow public participation in the discussion of the proposed budget for the 23-24 fiscal year for General Fund, Child Nutrition Fund, Debt Service Fund, and Compensation Plan. Public hearing, Dr. Bigby.
All right, Dr. Bigby, you want to make your way to the podium there. As Dr. Bigby makes his way to the podium, Mr. President, there are a few things that I want to speak to that I'd share with the board that I wanted to give you some context to. First of all, I want you to get oriented. You've got several documents that are sitting in front of you. The first one, that big packet, is the budget hearing, so that's what we're going to be reviewing. And then there are several other documents that Dr. Bigby is going to be referring to, and they're all right there in front of you. And those are your documents to keep, of course. So I want to share that. So between myself and Dr. Bigby and Kathleen Brown, we're going to be prepared to lead the presentation here in just a little bit. And then there may be questions related to other staff members. And so the staff, they're all prepared and ready to be able to provide some information. A couple things I want to say to give some context from just a legislative standpoint and some of the challenges that I want to keep at the forefront as you hear this information. The first thing is and I can't say this enough, I know you've heard me say it a lot, but the 88th legislative session, you know, they still ended the session with a $33 billion surplus in the rainy day fund. And as of today, there still have been no raises committed to teachers. And as of today, there is still no school finance bill that has been passed. And those are really important things to remember, especially as it relates to salaries. This is that time of year when we're, comparing salaries and that sort of thing. And, districts are built different and have different tax bases and different enrollments. And so it's just mindful to think of just the reality that what we hear doesn't always truly paint the picture when you get to comparing districts. It's like, for example, for us, when we think about total compensation, our board has been so gracious that we have paid for the insurance escalation cost for our employees. We've included that in the budget. You have been gracious to our staff to do that. Well, not every district does that, so it's not included in their overall compensation budget. But when you see the material maybe that certain organizations put out, they don't always get into those weeds. So at this time of the year, it's just always good to have that context and be thinking about that. In Duncanville, we are fortunate and we are blessed that our board prioritizes its personnel. And you've done that over the years. You've been consistent in doing that. And, you're committed to taking care of our staff. And we are very grateful and thankful for that. The other thing that I wanted you to have just as context as we begin the budget hearing, so the governor at the end of the session, which is like May 30th, between that time and actually yesterday, June 18th, the governor has an opportunity to either veto bills that have been presented to him or not. And so yesterday, any bill that wasn't vetoed actually becomes law. So, technically, what he didn't veto yesterday is law today. But obviously, there's still more things that have to happen, even though it is law technically today, so that districts can prepare from a budget standpoint. And so the reason I share that with you is because some of the items that became law today, I have not captured in the budget that we'll be presenting to you to adopt tonight. And I emphasize tonight because we know at some point there's going to be clarity on what this really means. It could be July, it could be August, it could be September, we don't know, but at some point there's going to be clarity. Some of these items are unfunded mandates, and some of these items, they are funded, but not adequately funded to do what the governor wants us to do. And so because those things are still a question mark, I've not put them in the budget that we'll be passing tonight. Emphasize the budget that we're passing tonight. So, like, for example, there are several items in House Bill 3 that actually became law today because the governor did not veto them yesterday, and they're all centered on safety and security. So you may be familiar, you may have seen a lot of conversation on the local news. Districts are required to have an armed individual on every campus. So technically that is law today. But obviously we are not able to fulfill that requirement today. Once it becomes more official and it goes through the policy update process and we know exactly what that's going to mean from a budget standpoint, then of course we will be in compliance with that. But we're not at a point to where we can do that today. And so I just want to give you that lesson as you think about, because obviously the thought would be, well, if it's law today, how come it's not in the budget for tonight? So I wanted to give you my context and my rationale behind it. There are several other things there. There's information in there on training staff. Every staff that interacts with a student has to go through some mental health training. So technically that is law today, but there's been no definition about what that means. Obviously it is coming, it's just not today. So in the budget tonight, there won't be anything addressing that specifically. Once the governor goes through the process of really defining what that means, we will come back, we will amend the budget, and we will get, in a much better place in terms of being compliant. And the reason why that's important is because Section 44, the Texas Education Code, stipulates that districts in Texas have to be on a July 1st or a September 1 budget. And you can't operate or expend any money in the district unless the board adopts a budget before the first day of the budget year. So that is the function of tonight. And we have just one more week in this month, and I don't think anything is going to change next week. So we have this week and next week in order to adopt a budget so that we can operate the district on the first and moving forward, with the understanding that we are going to amend the budget multiple times throughout the course of the year to address personnel, and once there's clarity and policy written so that districts can know and understand how to interpret the laws that have been passed. So I just wanted to spend some time talking about that so that you can have that context as we go through the budget. The other thing that I think is important for us to just be mindful of, the governor has scheduled several special sessions. The first special session is going on right now, and it is all on the property tax relief. You may have been hearing there's a standstill between the lieutenant governor and the governor. They have different philosophies on how to handle property tax, and neither one of them is budging right now. And what's important to know about that is that what the governor has put out in his schedule is that the next special session will be dedicated towards school funding and teacher pay. So I want you to think about it. They're still on property tax relief, and we're on the brink of July 1st. And they have not made a decision to move on from the property tax fight first. So that could go throughout July, it could go throughout August before they even have a special session on school funding and teacher pay. So we're going to have to adopt our budget under current law, knowing that when things change in the next couple of months or however long, because there's been no word on the start date for the second special session, which is the school funding and teacher pay. The third session that he has put out there is school choice. So he'll have a session, and obviously that he's calling the legislators back so that he can, I want to say kind of force their hand to include and expand education savings accounts is what he's terming it, or his voucher program. So that's his priority, and that's what he's going to do. And then the fourth session is the virtual education session. So the next three sessions, there is no word on the start date. So as we sit here tonight, we have no idea when these other sessions are going to take place, except to know that sometime after this first session on property tax relief, then the governor will put out when these next ones are going to. So we are, in a sense, operating in a vacuum, which is why we've been so focused on our board advocating with these legislators. They are really tying our hands, and they are making it incredibly difficult for us to do our business as a school district. And so we're going to continue making that a priority and continue letting them know. So there are two budget options that I'll be presenting to you tonight as we go through the hearing. And I want to give you the highlights, and of course, as we go through the hearing and when I turn it over to Dr. Bigby, we're going to get into grave detail about what these mean, but I want you to have this in your mind as we begin the process. So the first one is going to be an increase in starting teacher pay from $57,000 to $58,500. And along with that will be all the teacher scale adjustments. You have that one sheeter right there, Dr. Ivey, in your hand that really matches what I've just stated. In addition to that, I'm going to be proposing that you consider a minimum of 15 or more raise for the following $15 or more, $15 or more raise. And we're going to break that down so you see what that really means here in just a second. But that would be for aides, clerks, reception, secretary, food service, bus drivers, custodial, maintenance, grounds, that category of employees. And then I'm recommending no raise for the administrative professional and administrative management. That includes coordinators, directors, counselors, assistant principals, basically all of district leadership and senior leadership. The second proposal will be the same bullets, except instead of a $15 or more raise for the aides, clerks, receptionists, etc., a $13 minimum, so that you have options. And of course, we're going to have all the breakdown for you here in just a second as we go through the slides, so that you can have an understanding of what the impact that is on the district. So I wanted to give you those high-level context so you can kind of be gauging your thoughts as we go through. And of course, we're going to take our time. This is very important information. We're going to check with you, make sure you don't have any questions before we even advance to the next slide, because we know how very important this is for you, and we know your commitment to get it right for our employees. So we're committed to doing that for you this evening. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bigbie. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, President McNeely, Board of Trustees, Dr. Smith. I won't be saying that much. Not at home anyway. As Dr. Smith said, be sure that as we go through this thing, if you have thoughts, comments, or something, that you let us know, because we've been dealing with it for a good while, and you guys are seeing some of it mostly for the first time. So we want to make sure you understand it. First of all, you try to base things off of revenue. And even though there's a special session that the House has already passed compression of tax rates, the Senate won't listen to it at all. So that may not happen. So what we have to go with is what current law says. So with current law and what our anticipated values are, the M&O tax rate would go down from 93.29 to 90.80. That's about a 3-cent drop. INS rate we intend to keep the same at 32 cents. So the total tax rate this year is 125.29. That would drop to 122.80. Keep in mind that's probably a fictitious number. That's based on current law, and well, it depends on which of the dueling houses wins out. It may stay at that, but there may be a homestead exemption that helps you out that way. But I would imagine we'll have some kind of tax compression, which will bring that tax rate down lower. But if we had to do it today, that was using the calculation system that we use for this year. That's what the tax rate would be, and mainly because our values continue to go up, so the tax rate would go down. I'll confuse you with that. Okay. Next slide, please. Fund balance, it's a good place to start talking about this. At the end of 22-23, we're anticipating that, remember we broke this down as we talked about it, $14.2 million being available for you to spend as you see fit. Once again, as an outgoing CFO, I have to recommend you don't go spend it, but that's my job. And that's the politically astute thing to do, is to not spend it down. $30 million is committed. If you'll remember, we talked about cash flow and where we had to make sure we could pay the bills during the time that we're not getting any state funding or tax revenue. $21.6 million is what the auditors have declared is reserve. This for a lot of different things, but that's typically held in reserve. And we're looking at probably a $65.8 million fund balance at the end of this year. Once again, we won't know that for sure until the audit comes to you in November, but that's the best estimate that we can come to right now. ESSER funds, they've been a nice lady to dance with, but the song's just about over. And we've got about $6.17 million left in ESSER funds. Almost $5.6 million of that's going to to cover, if you remember the pay increases that you gave last year, we covered $6.6 million of that in ESSER funds. We're covering over $4 million of it, or $4.4 million of it this year. And then MAP testing, which is pretty critical to our student achievements, about $585,000, and that takes care of the ESSER funds. There'll be a little here and there, but that's the bulk of it will be gone. Yeah, well, it has to be gone by the September of next year, or we lose it. So we'll make sure that it's spent wisely. Any thoughts, questions there? Okay, next slide, please. Legislative review. Last session, they passed a law that increased, and without getting too deep in this, the Tier 2 funding, which is how funds are equalized in the state. And that's called the money that you raise in revenue from golden pennies. And if you remember, when we passed the TRE, we accessed all the golden pennies that we could then. But they moved that level from $96 to $121 per penny of tax rate, which would have raised our revenue about $2 million if we would have had the same ADA coming up next year. But as we went through with the demographer, and you heard Dr. Smith talk about 1,000 students graduating, well, we don't have 1,000 coming in. So our ADA for next year is estimated almost 200 students less, or average daily attendance. And that ate up the $2 million that we would have gained, but at least that was there to put the $2 million there, so we didn't lose anything. We just broke even by our average daily attendance going down. Dr. Smith mentioned House Bill 3 and the funding that's out there. The law did pass. It contains $15,000 per campus additional. And out of their graciousness, they went from $9.72 to $10 per student in funding, which is kind of a kick in the teeth, but it's a little bit, so we'll take that. Now, exactly how this is going to work out, as Dr. Smith said, who knows? By the time TEA gets through writing the administrative rules for this, it may look totally different than what the law, that happens often when TEA gets through with it. You can't quite tell it was the same thing that it started with. So, and that may be months before we know that. Part of House Bill 3 says that we will have an armed person on the campus. There's a few things that the board can do differently to change that up, but when the bottom line says there'll be a gun on the campus on somebody. So I think I'm glad I'm leaving. Special ed, there's been some additional funding for that, and we have no idea how that's going to come about. Once again, TEA, well, they control the purse strings for all of this. Even though the legislature passes it, it has to go through TEA before it gets to us. And there's an increase in instructional materials allotment, and that's basically set up so that parents can have access to see what we're doing curriculum-wise, and hopefully that'll help. We never have enough money in that to pay for all the textbook and technology that we need, but we won't know what that's going to be either until TEA comes out with their rules. Everything all right with that one? So we're anticipating revenue of $127,500,000 next year. It's a lot of money, but it's not near enough money. But that's where we began putting the budget together, was with that. That included using the ADA that we projected and the current funding formulas that are in place with the House Bill 3 additions. Okay, next slide. And now comes the part you don't want to talk about, is where we're going to spend it. 22-23 anticipated expenses, and once again, we won't know these until we get payroll run at the end of June, but this is as close of an estimate as we can get. Spend about $126 million, and we're anticipating that number to be closer to $130 million next year. You can see the big jump is in 6,100 or payroll costs. Keep in mind we had $6.4 million of ESSER money there last year, and 2.2 million of that is gone. So that initially took half of that away. The state has a system that allows our budget to reflect funds that they're putting into TRS for us. It's called TRS on behalf funding, and basically what they do is they generate an expense and a revenue, an offsetting revenue. We don't get any money, we don't lose any money, but it becomes part of our budget, and part of that calculation is why the 6,100 looks as high as it does, is because of the state money. That the 127 million revenue reflected that same thing in the revenue, so it's a direct offset, and it'll show even through the year that we're expending that, but the revenue always matches it. So it's the one thing that the state does. We don't get anything, but we don't lose anything from it. It's an interesting. They put it in place so they could tell the public, well, we're really spending this much amount of money on education, when before they just paid the TRS bill. In this way, that it really elevated everyone's expenditures and revenues. Questions? I know that can be a little cloudy. You can see the rest of the objects stay pretty well the same for what we have in this budget. Okay, next slide, please. Legislative expenses. Dr. Smith covered a lot of this stuff. I'll just quickly look at it and once again let you know it's not in the budget. There's nothing in there for the expenditures because we don't know, for one, and there's not an offsetting revenue for them. Safety requirements, the armed personnel we talked about. There has to be a panic alarm in every classroom, which nope, none of us think that's a bad idea. It's just funding it. You can't use a wall chart anymore. It has to be electronic to check eyes. Creation of instructional materials, parent portal is what I was talking about, where the parents can look at what we're teaching, which is not a bad idea. It's just not funded. Human trafficking signs, those have to be put up around the campus. Purchase and disposal of opioid antagonist. That's hard to say. Try to say it real fast. And the purchase of disposable and medication for respiratory distress. These are the injections that we have to keep on hand if there's an opium overdose, and you've probably seen the news. That's actually saves some lives, and it's a good idea. Same thing with respiratory distress, but those, and dyslexia testing and teacher qualifications, certifications have changed. And once again, they're not in the budget, and once again, they're not funded. $33 billion extra floating around, and they're still passing unfunded mandates. And makes you want to spank somebody. Any questions on those? I know that's a little disheartening to hear, but that's the picture that we have. Okay, next slide, please. So when you put those two together, our anticipated revenue of 127.5 and expenditures of 130.5, you can see the result of that. We don't have the revenue that we'd like to have for what the expenses that are in our budget without doing anything different. This is just totally moving on with the things we brought forward and covering the raises that happened last year. So I'll let that sit with you a minute. Doesn't include any kind of compensation, salary adjustments, insurance, employer contributions, or the unfunded mandates. That's certainly not the picture that we want to paint for you, but it's the accurate picture. Okay, next slide. And I'll turn this over to Ms. Brown, who will be much more eloquent than I am.
All right, good evening, Mr. President, Board of Trustees, Dr. Smith. Based on the information that Dr. Bigby just shared with us, the next portion of our presentation this evening will be focused on where do we go from here with the information that we have. So we'll start off talking about efficiencies. We've talked about the plight before us and what we have and what we are anticipated to spend on next year. And so we're going to spend some time talking about what we're doing as a district to be more efficient with what we have. And so in one area is staffing. You saw the payroll costs listed on the screen. We know that that makes up the majority of our budget. And so as we are looking to become more efficient, that's where we go, is to positions. And you'll hear me talk about positions tonight because we know we value our employees. And so anything that we're talking about the position and not a person. When we're looking at strategic staffing, that is a process that is that we use district-wide. When campuses at this time of the year, we're looking at projections. How many students are we projected to have at a campus? And so we are being conservative on the front end. We have to be conservative and good stewards as it relates to the positions in the district. So we are also limiting personnel that may be requested to be added. And so we're always analyzing requests, but even more so closer at this time as we're limiting anything that's added on top of what we already have as a district. Also, we are eliminating positions. You'll see as we go through this slide the number of FTEs we currently have locally that are local funded, and then what that looks like projected for the next school year. And so we are eliminating positions through attrition. So a position becomes vacant, and we go through a process collaboratively about, okay, should we fill this position? What things need to be considered before we make a decision not to fill this position, because the work is still there. So many times that looks like a distribution of duties to other places, our departments working together to figure out, okay, what do we stop doing if those duties are going to another person, because the plate is only so big, right? It can only hold so much. And that is a process we go through with every single position as it becomes vacant at this time. And then, of course, reducing our supplemental spending is another area as a district in which we are being more efficient, not changing the standard of excellence. That's the expectation in Duncanville. However, how can we be more efficient in what we are purchasing as a district? Okay. Do you have any questions about the budget efficiencies before we move forward? Okay. Next slide. So we'll start looking at a few salary comparisons, and we can go to the next slide. When we're talking about personnel and the individuals that make up various categories in the district, you'll hear us refer to some specific groups of employees tonight. And so when we look at our breakdown here in Duncanville, the first category in alignment with what we do, teaching and learning, teachers make up the largest portion of our personnel and our personnel budget, with 53.5% of our salaries in that area. And that just speaks to the work that we're doing here as a district. The next section is our campus support staff. When we talk about campus support staff making up 16.4% of our personnel budget, those are individuals who are supporting the learning. And so that could be anybody at the campus, a specialist. It could be someone who's a coordinator at the campus level. All of the people that are there, our teachers, our librarians, our nurses, those individuals are there and supporting at the campus level, and they make up 16.4% of our personnel salaries. Okay. Our next category, you will talk about this group quite a bit tonight. It's our auxiliary staff members, and our auxiliary staff, they make up 9.3% currently of our personnel salaries. Those are individuals, our bus drivers, our food service assistants, custodial staff, our security officers, our groundskeepers, our maintenance workers and painters. All of those individuals fall into our auxiliary staff, and we've been talking about them through the workshop process, and we will spend some time speaking about that group of staff members this evening. Okay, next are our campus administrators. That's campus principals and assistant principals. Those individuals who are in administrative positions at the campus level make up 9% of our personnel salaries. Okay. Our next group, who we will also speak about tonight when we're talking about the various proposals that Dr. Smith is bringing forward to you this evening. These are instructional aides and all of our clerical staff. We often will refer to them as our instructional support and administrative support staff. So when we talk about 13 or more, 15 or more, this is a group that we are speaking of in addition to that auxiliary group of employees. Okay. And then the last two categories that will not be a part of the discussion tonight as it relates to anything that's being recommended regarding compensation are our central administration. They make up 3.7% of our overall personnel salaries, and that's people who are at the central office, our plaza staff, those professionals, those people who are exempt staff members, but not those who are instructional. Our instructional administration makes up 3.1%. And if you think teaching and learning center, you think of those individuals who are in our bilingual ESL, early childhood, special education. They are supporting us on the instructional side in administrative positions. And so this gives you a breakdown of how that 86% of the overall budget is spent and where the majority of salaries are in our district. Any questions you have about that? All right, thank you. Okay, so if we look at current positions, and of course tonight we're talking about the local budget. When we look at our local positions for the current 2022-2023 school year, there were 1,944 positions. Now, all of those positions were not filled, but that's the number of FTEs, as we call them, that we had. Moving forward into next year, we are currently sitting at 1,939 positions, and this is the process. And so that goes back to the other side as we are going through that process with attrition, looking at each position. Are we going to fill that position? If we do not fill that position, then what happens to those duties? So the net change right now is 5 positions, and you will see that number continue to change as we're strategic in our staffing throughout the summer. As it relates to our ESSER positions, we know that these are not a part, of course, of our local budget, but just bringing back to your attention that there were 12 positions that are funded, ESSER-funded positions, and we all know that those are positions that we have to make some decisions about at the end of the school year, and those employees, those staff members are very aware that they are in an ESSER-funded position. Now, there are positions and people that are critical to the success of our organization and our students in learning, but we want to make sure that we keep that at the forefront, that 12 positions in our district are currently funded through ESSER funding. Okay? Any questions there? All right, next slide. All right, this is a slide we looked at the workshop, but it will feed right into the information into the compensation proposals that will be made tonight, and it is comparing teaching staff salaries in Region 10. So there are 80 districts in our region, in Region 10. 59 of those 80 districts participated in the TASB salary study. Districts have the option to participate. Duncanville ISD always participates, and this platform gives us some very great information that we are able to use as we make decisions for Duncanville. So when we are looking at a teacher in Region 10, of course, we know that the state has set a minimum salary that a teacher in the state of Texas has to be paid, and I will say Region 10, every district in Region 10 pays above the minimum salary. So the lowest paid teacher coming in at 0 years of experience in Region 10 starts off at $40,000, okay? The highest paid teacher with 0 years of experience in Region 10 makes $61,000. And then you can see Duncanville, our current 22-23 0-year teaching salary is at $57,000, okay? If we jump over to 10 years of experience, a person coming into a district in Region 10, the lowest paying district for 10 years of experience is $47,300. The highest paid teacher coming in with 10 years of experience in Region 10 is $65,325. And in Duncanville, if you were hired today and you had 10 years of experience, you would come in at $59,200. Now, I'll pause here to say for Duncanville, this is a hiring schedule for us. Remember, we're not on a step schedule, so we don't say, okay, when you get to 1 year, you make this amount. When you get to 2 years, you make that amount. 3 years, that's the great work that you do. So our employees actually benefit from the raises that you approve. And so a person may have 10 years of experience in Duncanville right now and may make more than the $59,200 because of raises that they have received. Okay, when we look at 20 years of experience in our region, you see the lowest paid teacher with 20 years of experience being hired into a district is at $55,427. The highest being right over $69,000, and in Duncanville, if you were hired today and you had 20 years of teaching experience, you'd be at $62,700. The actual salaries in our region kind of brings all of that together. Of course, that lowest teacher that's paid in Region 10 aligns with 0 years. They're making $40,000 a year. The highest paid teacher reported in our region makes over $89,000 a year, and the highest paid teacher in Duncanville ISD, there are actually 2, that make $79,572. Okay? All right? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that. I have a question. I don't need the name of the district in our 0 year salary, but do you have the enrollment number for the highest paid district? Their student enrollment?
Yes, I
What
have
is
that
that?
at my seat. They're one of our larger districts that are our neighbors. That teacher actually is in Green Prairie ISD. They have over 30,000. I don't want to give you a bad number, but it's like over 30,000.
Yeah, Grand Prairie is approaching 40,000.
They're now approaching almost 40,000 students. So that's a great point that you bring up. All the districts in Region 10 are not the same size, and so we have districts that are small as they may have 500, 600 students, all the way to districts that are 50, 60, 70, 100,000 students, depending on the district. So they're, of course, not all the same size. When we start looking at our comparisons, we'll be looking at those that are not the same size of us, but those that we compete with as it relates to recruitment of staff members.
Right, and just for the, for budgeting purposes, I just wanted to just note that while we are under the highest, we also have a lower enrollment, which is where we get our money from. So in all of those categories with the highest salaries, are you saying all of those districts, is that a different district? Are those 4 different districts, or?
Well, it could be any particular district. It's just whatever the highest was, the lowest was in that particular year.
Okay.
So yes, there are names attached to those districts, and in some cases, in most cases, I will say, if they're the highest, they are much larger than we are.
So none of the ones that are in the highest quadrants have 13,000. They have more than 13,000 students.
Oh yeah, they'll have more than 13,000 students. So they are funded. They have more funding than we do.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just creates just a picture of what we are discussing as it relates to where we currently are today as a district with our teaching pay scale. On last year, you moved the starting teacher pay salary to $57,000 annually, and this is where we're sitting currently. With districts that are listed on this screen, they vary in sizes as far as enrollment is concerned, and so we're comparing apples and oranges on this screen, and some bananas, just all sorts of things. And so when we're looking at those districts, we are looking at districts who we're competing with for staff. So we start at $57,000. You see the 4 districts that are below us as of today, and then the other districts that are above us as of today. And just for example, if you take Garland ISD, they start $3,000 ahead of us. Garland ISD is one of the largest school districts in the state. And so when we're looking at our size in comparison to a Garland and Irvin and Arlington, they are much bigger than we are. So when we talk about being competitive, we're talking about competing with people who are not exactly our size all the time. Okay? All right, next slide. Yes, sir.
So just a minute ago, I quoted Grand Prairie as 35,000. I was a little off. They're 30,000 students.
30,000.
So I just wanted to make that correction.
I was about to say they grew.
Thank you. And the staff out there, they provided me with that information.
Yes.
So thank y'all.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so next, if we look at where our bus drivers are, our bus drivers currently start at $18 an hour, and this is with 0 years of experience. That is not to say that every driver we have makes $18. If they came to us brand new this year, they are starting at $18 an hour. Now, when you voted to change the bus driver pay on last year, we were a little bit more competitive, right? But we have districts around us who have September starts and all of those things. They were doing their budgets after us, and so you can see where we currently fall. There's one district on this screen that's paying lower than us right now, that's Red Oak, and all other districts for 0 years of experience are paying above us at this time. Okay, any questions? All right, next slide. Okay, so if we look at our starting custodial pay, our starting custodial pay is the same, just like our bus drivers. We set the pay rate, and then things shifted around us. There's only one district currently in our comparison group that starts at $11 with us. You see that district here on the screen, and every other district that is listed is currently paying above us at this time. Our custodial staff, this is one of the pieces that I do want to highlight, is some of those districts were even with us and even below us, and during the school year, some changes were made. So this continues to change and look different as people are finding it very difficult to fill positions throughout the year, and they've just made some changes during the year to move their beginning salaries for positions. Okay. All right. Anything? Okay. All right, so now we'll take a look at a few compensation proposals. And Dr. Smith shared some of the information with you at the beginning, and we'll take a closer look at that. We know what our revenue is anticipated to be and what our anticipated expenses are, and then what the $2.9 million, almost $3 million of where we would currently be sitting just with that information. And just as a reminder, that doesn't include any compensation increases. We're going to talk tonight a little bit about what's happening with insurance and the impact that that would have, and then, of course, all of the unfunded mandates that Dr. Bigby shared as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so if we look at the first proposed compensation adjustment, when we talk about 15 or more, 15 or more says that individuals, employees who are in 3 different pay categories, our auxiliary employees, those that we named, our transportation, warehouse, security, all of those individuals. It's talking about our administrative support, that's our secretaries, our clerical staff, and then our instructional support, our paraprofessionals, our instructional aides. Those are the 3 groups that we'll be talking about this evening when we talk about 15 or more. And so that means that at a minimum, with 0 years of experience, if this was the plan that was adopted, that each individual in those pay groups would not make less than $15 an hour. Okay, so you see where we're starting here in the yellow section, and if the teacher pay scale was increased, our hiring schedule to $58,500 with 0 years of experience, the cost for that is almost $1.4 million. To make that change to our current teacher salary and to make adjustments to individuals on that scale. And then if all of those individuals in those 3 pay categories made a minimum of $15 or more, the cost of that, just over $2 million. Okay, so we see what the total would be, $6.4 million for that to occur. And then we go back to what we started with. How do we become more efficient, right? How do we chip away at this? And so those efficiencies that are listed there it's the work of our auxiliary directors coming together and collaborating about how can we be more efficient so that we have some savings to get our staff to where we want them to be. And so those are what those efficiencies are. That's not going to be just for the auxiliary team, though. That's the expectation across the district. Every department, every campus, all of us will feel that as the conversations are occurring, decisions are being made, positions are being analyzed. And so with those efficiencies, it would be almost $1.7 million that would bring the total anticipated amount that we would still need to $4.7 million. That's at the $15 or more for staff members. Okay, I'll pause there. Questions? Okay, all right, next slide, please. Okay, so if we take that $15 or more and that $58,500 start for teachers, if no other district around us did anything, if everybody stayed exactly where they are, and we know that we are always the front runner, so people probably, if they could, they're watching right now to see what we're doing, so they can say, what is Duncanville doing so we can move tomorrow? And so if everyone stayed the same, this is where we would fall. At $58,500, you see the district that would start even with us, the districts that would pay lower than us, and then the districts that would be paying higher than us. I will tell you that a few districts on this screen have already made some decisions. Some of them have made the decision that they jumped so far last year that they can't jump again. They've made a decision already that we've got to stay put, right? So unless the state says we have to, we're going to stay put. So we know some of them will stay here, and then others, they're in the process like we are, deciding what that will look like for their teachers. Another thing I'd want to bring to your attention is when in Duncanville we talk about total compensation, right? And so we talk about how much a teacher is paid at face value based on their years of experience, but in addition to that, we're going to talk about what you contribute to benefits each year. We talk about the sign-in bonuses and stipends that we have here in the district, and that's that conversation that we have to have with employees as they exit to say, hey, okay, so what are they offering you? And okay, so how much are you going to make? And when you put all of that together, sometimes it's not so beneficial. I always share in our new employee orientations on Thursday, there's never one where somebody isn't returning to Duncanville. And that means something. One, because of environment, they're returning. But sometimes they realize what Dr. Smith tells us all the time, it's not greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. And when you think total compensation, until you take that check home, you don't know what that's going to look like for you. And so we see that a lot when we look at our teacher pay scale. Okay? And I'll pause there so you can take a look at those districts. Okay? Next slide. If we were going to 15 or more for our bus drivers, we would move from $18 with 0 years of experience to $22 an hour, and that's huge. So that's an additional $4 an hour for a bus driver or anyone in those particular pay grades. And so if no one else moved, and we know that districts have been making decisions already about drivers, people are bleeding out, it's very difficult to find drivers. We believe that this would make us very competitive in the market. You see the districts that would be paying below us, some of them bigger than us, and then those districts that would be paying more than us, okay? And those who are even, who would be even with us as well. Okay. All right, next, yes, ma'am.
Do most school districts average about the same amount of hours? Because, you know, mileage matters and number of students, so how does that average out with the gasoline and salaries? And in Red Oak, they're kind of way far.
Spread out.
Spread out, so.
Well, I would not be the expert. Do you all know that? Do you all know that? The total mileage is what you asked? Oh,
Yeah, so-
phone a friend.
Total hours involved.
Oh,
Greg,
now,
can you help us
I
out
can
on
speak
that?
to hours of employees, right? So our bus drivers, due to the number of bus drivers we have, I'll answer the piece, that's the HR piece, bus drivers that we have, our bus drivers drive multiple routes, right? So our bus drivers, because we're on that tiered start and end schedule, from elementary all the way up to high school, our bus drivers may drive multiple routes throughout the day. So the number of hours that they work may be more than someone else who just gets one route. That's another thing, that's a great point that you bring up, because that's another thing we see. Someone may leave and they may not drive 4 routes. They might get to drive 1 route or 2 routes, and so I may be making more per hour, but when I was in Duncanville, I drove more hours per day. And then I will, did I say that correctly? Am I hired to drive? Look at this way. Yeah, he taught me that, so that's how I know that. So yeah, he taught me everything I know about bus driving. Thank you, Brad. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the next would be our custodial staff. You remember where we were on the first slide for the current school year. We were far left over there. If we were to start at a minimum of $15 an hour for all employees in those 3 groups, we would be very competitive. If no one else moved, it would be very difficult for districts to actually catch us. There would be 1 district even with us, and there would be 1 district paying 50 cents more per hour than us at this time. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Okay, next slide. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Bigby to put it together for us. I'll just leave my stuff there.
Okay, as we look at that plan, the $15 or more and $58.5 for teachers, you can see the top line there is what we've been talking about, what our projected difference between revenue and expenditures are for this year. We projected that out for the next 2 years, mainly because we lose the ESSER funding. So you can see if nothing took place, what would happen to that difference in revenue and expenditures in the out years. If this plan would be the one that you would adopt, you can see what happens in the net in the first year. We talked about that, or Ms. Brown did. And in the out years, you're looking, once again, to add $4.4 million to that number for this year, so it gets a little bigger as it goes out there. What does that do to fund balance? That's where that difference would have to come from. In the first one, we're going to begin with $65.9 million in fund balance. There's a $2.9 million is that initial figure. We'd be adding $2.3 million to that. So the fund balance would go from the 65 to 60,600,000. In 24-25, the 2.9 would come with us. The 2.3 would come with us, plus we'd lose the 4.4 from ESSER funding. So fund balance will go down from 60 to about $51 million. The same thing, same numbers would take place for 2025, 26. The 2.9, the 2.3, and the 4.4. So your fund balance at that time would be down to $41 million. This is assuming there's no help from anywhere, and this is the plan that's adopted. You don't have any choice but to absorb that from fund balance. It's a lot of numbers and a lot of numbers with a negative in front of them. Be happy to answer any questions you may have. Stay here long enough to where you can thoroughly understand that. Always feeling like the Grim Reaper when I come up here. She gets to talk about, this is what it would look like, and I talk about the bad end of it. But, we just want to present to you the facts, and that's the way they are if we don't get any help. Are we going to get any help? Right. We put it in our prayers every night anyway, and hopefully the boys and girls in Austin will come through with something. But right now, we all we can look at is currently where we are. Yeah, right. Hopefully, when I'm gone, Todd will come up here and tell you some wonderful things that took place in the legislature, but give me credit for some of that. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide.
Any questions? Comments?
Bixby, can you elaborate on how property taxes fit into all of this?
Yeah, and you would think, it's particularly as you as property owners, as you keep shelling out more and more money, that would make a difference. But the way the system's set up, it doesn't make a difference. The only difference it makes is how much comes locally and how much comes from the state. And they set that up years ago. Once again, I keep thinking they don't have any idea what they're doing down there, but they know exactly what they're doing down there. It keeps, as your property taxes go up, it keeps reducing the amount of money that the state has to put in. Now, if the compression that Governor Abbott's talking about, if they would put that in, then that would substantially reduce your property taxes and without reducing our revenue. But anything above 2.5% growth is a moot point. The compression takes care of that. The formulas are set up to allow us that much, but we can't get any more than that.
Would you please elaborate on how new developments impact that, what you just described?
The same system. Once that, unless they bring some kids in with them, which we hope they do, but it's the same thing. As that property grows, 2.5% of it is all we're going to get out of it. We went over 10% last year, and 2.5% is all we gained from that. The state gains from the rest of it. And that's why you keep seeing our share go up and the state share goes down, but we don't have any more revenue. And people, taxpayers, bless their hearts, they don't see that. They think, okay, I'm paying more money, so the district's getting more money, but it doesn't work that way. It's a offsetting system. Now, it does help us on the INS side when we're paying debt. It helps us keep that debt payment down low because the state doesn't do anything to offset that. That money goes directly toward our debt payments. Anything else on this one? Okay, next.
Anything else?
Okay, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Brown.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
keep moving to the next slide.
Yes, sir. So the next plan is the proposed compensation adjustment with 13 or more. Those same three categories of employees, our auxiliary, instructional support, and administrative support, would be starting at a minimum of $13 with 0 years of experience. You see the starting point where we are on the yellow bar. Our starting teacher pay increase, our schedule would start at $58,500. The first amount is the same.
I'm sorry, 1 second.
Yes.
Hold on just a second.
Yes.
Do y'all care to see the $13? We do not care.
Next slide.
Keep moving.
So
Next
move
slide.
on.
Okay.
Move on.
Okay, next slide. Next slide. All right, so that brings us to insurance. And so when we had the budget workshop, we did not have information related to insurance. But now we have those numbers. I will tell you we have right at almost 1,050 employees who take insurance, medical insurance in the district. And currently as a district, we contribute $333 per employee per month. That's almost $4,000 a year, that total compensation, right? We see the blue chart at the bottom. It shows the amount that each one of those plans would increase for each employee, depending on if they're employee only all the way down to employee and family. The one that says HD The high deductible plan is the one that the majority of our employees take. And it would be an additional $40 for employee only. And so you can see with that $40 increase to the $333 that's already being paid, we would be contributing $373 per employee, and that would be a little over $500,000. That number is included in the slide that Dr. Bigby just shared with you with the numbers that the insurance increase of $40 is there. Okay.
We just wanted to make a comment. We wanted to thank Dr. Smith for giving us two options, but just for clarity, the little sidebar that was witnessed, we know we don't need to see the $13 an hour because that's not an option for us after you guys have put together such a great plan and proposal that we can see with the 15 or more. So that's what the discussion was about. We don't need to see anything lower than that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any questions about the insurance slide? Okay, next slide, please. All right, and so that brings us to this final slide. We would only be looking at the bottom row here with the the compensation moving to $58,515 or more, the revenue expenditures, the net, and then what that net would look like for us for the 23-24 as well as the 24-25 school year. Okay, next slide. All right, that brings us to the end, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or entertain any comments you have at this time.
We've spent a lot of time on this. You guys have given it to us in 3 or 4 different ways. We had a budget workshop, so we don't have any questions.
Okay, for public comments on this, before you make your way to the front, please allow me to read the following. Speakers will limit their comments to 3 minutes. If more than 5 speakers are present, speakers must limit their comments to 2 minutes. If delegations of more than 5 people plan to speak on the same topic, they should appoint 1 representative to speak on their behalf or be limited to 5 speakers. Having said all this, as we read your name, please come forward, state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Ms. Lupita Villalobos.
Lupita Villalobos, and my address is 1019 South Alexander Avenue in Duncanville. Good evening. I am a teacher in Duncanville ISD, and I am here to urge you to make a difference in the lives of the folks who continuously pour into our kids. To write success stories 1 student at a time, we need to be champions for our staff, each staff member. Teaching in 2013 isn't all sunshine and rainbows, even though I do teach pre-K here. Unfortunately, today more than ever, we are dealing with countless issues and stressors in and out of the classroom. Educators, we shoulder tremendous responsibilities, and we also face a lot of liability. I think it is safe to say many of us have questioned if teaching is still worth it. I love my students, I love my school, I love Duncanville. I know that what I do matters, and I have been recognized by this very board for being made with pride. I love to go above and beyond. I will spend my own time, my own money to make a difference. But the time has come for us as educators to put on our own oxygen mask, so to speak. I need to take care of me. The fact is, I could go down the road and make $10,000 to $12,000 more because I am a bilingual educator with a bilingual supplemental certification. This is a critical shortage area. And we are here 1 week before the deadline for teachers to resign without penalty prior to next school year, and I don't know how much you want to pay me. Districts are scrambling to recruit new teachers, particularly bilingual ones, yet I have not heard 1 word about how Duncanville plans to retain bilingual educators. We have been talking about perhaps a $60,000 start for new teachers. Now I find out it's less. But when you compare the $60,000 now to the $60,000 of last year, Just look at your own grocery bills. That's not the same amount of money. Our dollar is not stretching far enough. Add to this the housing availability crisis in DFW, where in this past February alone, I was 2 days away from homelessness. Luckily, I found a home to rent at a 75% increase in rent. I am not alone in this. Some of us are barely scraping by, and yet I feel bad for complaining. When my own teacher aide, who has also been recognized as being made with pride, makes approximately a third of what I make. How is she getting by with a family? We are talking about positions if they are vacant, but if those positions need to be filled, then we are talking about people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this hearing now is closed. And we will move on to communication for agenda items. And seeing there is none, we'll move on. Consider the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to propose that we move items 8, B, C, D, and E to the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move B, C, D, and E from action to consent. Any questions? All in favor? Motion carries. Now, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Motion carries. Make sure I know where we are. Now we'll move on to the action agenda. Okay. Action agenda item A, approval of the budget for 23-24. Dr. Bigby.
Hello again.
Hello.
We'll go through this a little quicker because some of it you've seen, but there's some information that you really need to absorb before you pass the budget. Next slide, please. This is what we built it off of, $495 for an ADA for next year. We built last year's off of 10,613. That's a projected enrollment of 11,533, and we're projecting a 91% attendance rate, which we had this year. There was a 6.8 increase in values. Once again, that's a preliminary number that's going to change by the time we get our final values at the end of July. Beginning teacher pay at $58,500. The pay categories, can't talk either, that were discussed to a minimum of $15. And we're going to pay $4.4 million toward the raises granted in 22-23. Remember, we're still paying back against those. And those are not projected in the expenditure budget. And adjustments to maintain integrity on the salary schedules. We always, as you increase one, there's a small increases that to make sure we have integrity where a 2-year teacher is not making the same as a 0-year teacher. Okay. What's not in there is pay increases for anyone other than teachers, auxiliary, and the support personnel that we've discussed, and any funding at all from the current legislation that has been passed. We talked about that earlier in the hearing, that we're going to get some funding out of some of those, but we really don't know what it's going to be yet. So those are not included in the budget. Okay, next slide. Here's the way the revenue breaks down. For next year, you can see the local and intermediate share. If you remember, that number used to be flip-flopped. There's about $65 million coming from local and intermediate sources and only $59 million coming from the state. and about 3.5 projected from the federal government. Most of that in the SHARS or the Medicaid reimbursement. Okay, next slide. This is how it breaks down. 51% is local, 46% state, and 3% from federal. This is the local and state vary a little bit from year to year, but this is pretty normal. Okay, next slide. Expenditures, you have to adopt the budget at a function level. So this is the way the functions shape out. Some of them are up, some of them are down a little bit over a prior year. By the way, this is in your budget book if you want to see it a little closer on page 6. No, that's the combined one. It's on page 7 of the budget book if you'd like to look at it there. But you can see how the expenditures check up. That's a total of $132,700,000. You can see down there at the total expenditure level, that's projecting a net change in fund balance of $5.3 million, which would leave you $60 million at the end of the year, or 45% of what the expenditures are. Questions there? Okay, next slide, please. This is how it breaks down instruction-related areas. This includes librarians. It's not just teachers, but it's everything that ties directly to instruction. 71% of the expenditures go back to instruction, 17% towards support, 7% to campus administration, and 5% to general administration. Okay, next slide, please. This is how it breaks out to, somehow or another we lost 6,100 out of this. Don't know how to get that back, but it is. No, it's not in your budget book. But you see the $132 million total, 7.9 of it's in purchased and contracted services, $5 million in supplies, $4 million in other expenses. So you add those 12, 16, about $116 million of it is in 6,100, which are all the payroll costs. Any questions there since I've shorted you one line of it? Okay, next slide, please. You can see how that breaks down. 86.6% of the expenditure budget is in personnel costs. So you can see why Ms. Brown was talking about if you do anything with the budget, that's where it has to be. The 6% is in purchased and contracted services. A lot of that's contracts that we have ongoing that are we call fixed cost. 6,300 is 3.9%. That's supplies. 6,400. A lot of those are fixed cost. We don't do that like business does that have fixed and variable costs. But when you come right down to it, there's about 6% of the entire budget that's not a fixed cost when you include personnel with it. So you could take all of that out and you still wouldn't have the kind of budget you'd want to. So the only place you really go is personnel if you're going to save any money. Okay, next slide.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bigby.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any, I just noticed, there may be no rhyme or reason, but I just see 6,500 is missing. Is that because it's in a totally different category?
Yeah, it's 6,500s don't fall into the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always people wonder, well, where did it go? Are you hiding that one? But no, it doesn't fall into the general fund expenditures. Child nutrition, this budget's budgeted revenue is quite a bit higher for next year. They actually had a very good year. This is based mainly on what they've done this year. You can see the revenues, local and intermediate, that's money they do collect, and catering, and the bulk of that comes from the federal government. Those are the reimbursable meals for $7.2 million there. Expenditures, the next slide, please. You can see where those come in. Food service costs are line 35 there, function 35, and they have some maintenance costs that go into food service, and they also have some security costs, and that makes up all of their expenditures. Okay, questions there? Next slide, please. Debt service. You can see our debt service bill went up about $700,000. That's $637,000. That's good when it doesn't go up any more than that. So you can see we're projecting total revenues of $17.8 million to pay our debt. Next slide. And you can see it all goes into function 71, which is debt service. I will point out here that at the bottom line, that percentage, 87.2%, that's going to give you an opportunity somewhere down the road. If you want to pay back some bonds early, then that fund balance is very good for that, and it saves you a lot of money in the long run if we have some bonds that we can prepay. But that's certainly up to you how you want to do that. But it's a good and healthy fund balance in INS. Okay, next slide. We talked about this earlier. I think we'll probably put somewhere around $3 million into fund balance at the end of this year. Most of that coming from the fact that we couldn't hire people. We had to pay a lot of contracted services for people that we couldn't hire, but still there's going to be a little surplus at the end of that. It's actually going to be a little bit more than that, but the states overpaid us a little bit of money, so that offsets. They paid us more than what we earned for that, so that'll take it back to about $3 million. We'll know that exact number in November when the audit's finished. Debt service, with the tax rate where it is, that's going to be about a $16 million fund balance at the end of this next year. So very good shape in debt service. Once again, you can't use any of that money to come back the other way. That's often a question, but legally you can't do that. Okay, next slide. There's the salary scenarios. We just have one now. We had two earlier, but that one's gone. So this is what you're looking at. This is what I think you probably, as a board, have discussed. So I just want to put those numbers up one more time so you see those. Questions there? Okay, next slide. Now I'll entertain any questions, comments you might have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bigby. I'm going to ask Ms. Brown to come up.
Okay.
Just as a little bit. So, board, thank you for your patience in allowing us to present the information to you. And thank you also for adopting this budget. Just for the record, and I want to make sure that it's clear, you know, what you are doing just for our staff. So by adopting this budget, you are taking our starting teacher salary from $57,000 to $58,500, and we appreciate that very much. In addition to that, you are continuing to adjust the teacher pay scale so that there is equity within our teacher pay scale. In addition to that, you are covering insurance again this year. So all the increase that's going up, you're taking care of that for our employees by adopting the budget that you are about to adopt. In addition to that, on the auxiliary side, that's aides, clerks, receptionists, secretaries, food service, bus drivers, custodial, maintenance, grounds. It's a reason why I'm listing those individually. We're increasing to a minimum of 15. Many of those individuals now will be at $18 and $22 an hour, just by this increase that you're doing. And again, of course, covering the insurance for those individuals. And then, Ms. Brown, the reason I wanted you up here is I know you have this number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we have some of the highest stipends in the area, in particular in some of our higher need to fill areas. So I wanted you to elaborate on that. That'll still be a part of the budget that the board is adopting.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, so with our stipends and sign-in bonuses for our campuses, we have our bilingual. We'll start with that one, our bilingual teacher sign-in bonus that we have. It's one of the highest in the entire state with $7,000. And in addition to that, we also have an annual stipend. If you're a certified teacher, certified teachers that are bilingual certified receive $5,000 a year. And that is divided up amongst over the course of all of their checks. A sign-in bonus comes at the very first beginning of the year, the first check for teachers. So their September check, they get their sign-in bonus. In addition to that, our hard-to-fill areas, everything's hard to fill now, but for our certified science teachers, our math teachers, our EOC, end-of-course exam teachers, those teachers also receive the sign-in bonus and an annual stipend of $3,500. We have our team leaders stipends, our department chairs, and those stipends now go all the way from elementary school up through high school, which was a new addition for us on last year. Our elementary and intermediate campuses did not have those stipends before, and so that is a benefit. Another stipend opportunity that we have has to do with our strategic plan and growing leaders. One of the stipends that we'll see this year is for our people who are ambassadors, our staff members who are ambassadors for our FLA and our ILA cohorts. That's an opportunity for us to continue to build. In addition to on the academic side, Duncanville also has very competitive stipends for UIL as well as for sports. And so our stipends are endless, basically, really, in Duncanville. We also have kept the elementary stipends that we call the ratio stipend. You remember those started this past school year for elementary classrooms that were over the 22-to-1 ratio, where those teachers received an additional $500 per student. Those are stipends that we still have in place. And although we didn't go through all of our sweet deals this evening, we know that as decisions are made, as funds are available, those will also be opportunities for us to compensate our staff with stipends as well. One that stands out that the high school is continuously working on, and technology and HR collaboratively with our Chief Academic Officer, is the Take Two initiative. We talked about in the workshop how we have the proximity learning and K-12 Elevate, all of those things, and how we can do that in-house in our own district and compensate our teachers for doing so. And so that is another stipend that we have in the district. So when we say total compensation, that is definitely what we mean, because there are lots of opportunities here in Duncanville to increase compensation.
Okay, thank you. And
I can keep going, but
yeah,
that's
just
enough.
the last thing, then we're done,
Yes,
unless the board has questions. This is all before we get anything from the legislature, and we know, you know, I'm not a bad man, but I mean, they're going to do something. You know, I just can't imagine that they're not going to do anything as it relates to teacher raises. So that's going to help us, whatever it is they do. And then as we go throughout the year, as you all have done, we have opportunities for a lot of one-time. So if there was any employee groups that we did not take care of passing the budget, that you're going to pass in just a little bit here, if you saw fit down the line, just as we've done in the past, you may say, hey, we want to allocate a one-time something. The benefit is it's not recurring. We're not locked into it. Those opportunities will be available too. So just wanted y'all to know that.
Question. Ms. Brown, with the stipends, do some require a multi-year commitment or more than 1 year?
Yes, well, if you leave the district, for example, if you receive a sign-in bonus and you leave the district before the end of the year, that stipend is then owed to the district. So they sign an agreement with their sign-in bonuses upon hire, and then with some of the stipends as well. Like, let's say you leave, because we had a lot of individuals who would hop districts. So I get the sign-in bonus, I get the stipend, I hop, I come back. So in Duncanville, we have a minimum requirement of time you have to be gone before you can come right back and get a sign-in bonus. Right, but the stipend is tied to your certification, so you're always eligible for your stipend. Yes, ma'am. And the one stipend that I forgot to mention that's a great, and we appreciate you all, is the loyalty stipend from last year for our staff members who had 15 or more years of experience. So I wanted to make sure I added that one as well. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Well, I have a comment. You know, Governor Greg Abbott graduated from Duncanville High School about 6 years after me. And I'd like for him to come and sit in that hot room and understand that whole budget adoption plan that we just went through, and how it's hard to make a decision without all the facts, you know? Now, he has to make a bunch of heavy decisions, but I don't think he understands it from the school district side. And I think he needs to understand that. And I know various groups and districts have gone down there and tried to talk to him, but their head is so full of junk that they can't really see what they're making us do. They're making us make a decision without all the facts. And I just think that's a shame.
I won't say what I think because I can't say it in public. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the general fund, child nutrition fund, and the debt service fund budgets for 23, 24, and the 23, 24 compensation plan as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Any more comments or questions? Okay.
I do. Just thank you to all of you who presented. We were well informed. You did a great job in bringing us the information for us to understand. Thank you.
Jackie.
So, Trustee Veracruz kind of said what I wanted to say as well. You know, thank you to Dr. Smith and his senior leadership team for putting together such a budget. We realized it was very hard, but it was noted, you all, you know, looked at efficiencies. You know, you looked at what other districts were doing. You looked to see where your vacancies were, so that kind of indicated where you needed to make, you know, some changes in salary. So I really appreciate the very comprehensive budget that you all put together. You know, as it was alluded to earlier, you know, we would like to have the ability to do more, and probably down the road, after the legislature has had the opportunity to weigh in and actually pass legislation that impacts, you know, the staff salary, we'll revisit it. So thank you for all you do. I noticed that there are some new employees, or not necessarily new employees, there are some employees that we don't generally see attending this meeting, so we'd like to thank, you know, those employees as well for, you know, taking the time out to come and see kind of what the board is considering as a part of the budget, and just for what you all do every day. We realize that it is a big sacrifice on your part, and we know that that stems from your love for students and the district. And so we just, you know, want to thank you all again for everything that y'all do every day.
Anybody else? Okay, let's vote. All in favor? Raise your right hand. 7-0, motion passes. Budget passes. Now you can relax. Okay,
Thank
now
you.
we're going to move on to information discussion agenda. The Citizens Faculty Advisory Committee and Facility Planning Update. Mr. Brackens.
Yes, sir. All right. We ready? Well, President McNeely, members of the Board of Trustees, and Dr. Smith, I'm pleased to be able to present to you our facility planning update. I'm Andre Brackens, the director of the Dallas office and partner in Huckabee Architects. And as we start this presentation, I again want to acknowledge and thank the staff and the leadership and everyone who's been participating in this process. Obviously, Dr. Halachka and her leadership as we continue to navigate and understand this process and continue to make progress. Next slide, please.
I want to remind you of the facility planning timeline and where we stand. If you notice the blue flags, we're at June already. And at June, we wanted to go through some of the committee meetings and updates. And that's where we are right now in terms of June. Next slide, please. As we talk about the committee, just a reminder, in May, we presented the facility assessment that was completed. That was part of the data, should you have chosen to proceed with the Citizens Facility Advisory Committee, which you did, which is comprised of approximately 22 persons from the community, a diverse representation of the community as well, and a committee that is obviously committed to serve and bring about these 4 purposes. Listed there in the slide, if you notice, to assist DISD in assessing and prioritizing the district's current and long-term facility needs based on, again, the data from the facility assessment that was provided and other items. Obviously, they wanted to consider equity throughout the district for the educational needs of all students and develop a recommendation that is obviously physically sound and important for your consideration. And then finally, to report their recommendations on how to proceed with a long-range facilities plan. So again, that was what this committee was tasked with, and they're continuing in that purpose. Let me give you in the next slide what's been accomplished thus far. We've had meeting number 1, which was on May 30th, and in that meeting they were able to define consensus, go on facility tours, look at the assessment and the overview, study the demographer's report, go through School Finance 101, look at the bonding capacity and tax impact scenarios, and then have roundtable discussions about program and facility needs after having all that data and information available to them. Meeting number 2 is coming up next week, and in meeting number 2, as you'll notice, we'll be touring Duncanville High School. We'll look at project analysis, results of a community survey, which was a really important survey done to get a temperature of what's happening in the community and perspective of the community. And we'll give you an example of that. We'll give you a sneak peek of what the results of that was later in this presentation. But in meeting number 2, that's what, again, the committee will get a chance to review and analyze. And then project prioritization, basically what's needed based on a priority level for the facilities, consensus building, and then ultimately finalize recommendations where they can come back to you and present their findings and make those recommendations for you ultimately to make the decision. And if needed, additional time is needed, we do have a placeholder for a 3rd meeting on July 11th if that's necessary. Next slide, please. So we did, at this last meeting, we were able to have tour groups, and you can see some of the photos of some of that action. Everybody, you know, we had 3 different tour groups that got on buses and actually went through a round-robin tour of Central, Smith, Daniel, Hardin, and Acton. And next slide, please. And each one of the groups made notes and made specific comments, and again, to come back and bring back collectively and corporately to discuss some of the things that they saw. Next group as well. You'll see tour group 3 in the next slide, and there's some smiles there on that bus as well as they're traveling around on that round robin of tours to see what's actually there, and to also get a sense of many of the things that the facility assessment identified, but they actually got a chance to walk the space, see it with their own eyes, experience what's happening there, and be able to make notes to help them in their recommendations ultimately to you. Next slide, please. So there was feedback when we came back together collaboratively to discuss basically what they saw and to basically begin to rank the items and the needs in terms of priorities. And if you see there, there's we kind of had an exercise for each school that was toured. Basically the yellow stickers, you know, represented issues that they saw that weren't good, obviously, that needed to be corrected. And then the blue stickies represented some of the things that they saw that were good and that were a good indicator. So that's just a visual of what happened there. Not only that, we called it the green dot, red dot kind of ranking system in terms of the priorities of all those items that were listed, what was most important to the district and the things that that really needed to be corrected. And so you see a ranking of those items there in that slide, addressing the ADA issues, which is accessibility. Obviously, security concerns, fencing, exterior classroom doors, exterior gyms, playgrounds. Those security concerns are not just concerns, but now they're actually Texas law as of May 31st in terms of security standards that need to be met and are required to be met. Roof, obviously we had leaks. They observed flooding issues. Carpet, flooring. Some classrooms were too small for educational delivery and some of the things that you're trying to do for student success. Portable buildings, a lot of them obviously need to be removed, and obviously much of the furnishings were outdated and potentially needed to be replaced. Next slide, please. We also presented to the committee the demographer's report, so the demographer was able to be there and present a possible new grade configuration where we're able to look at an early childhood campus, and then elementary school ages, middle school ages, and also high school. And the objective of this possibility presented by the demographer is that it eliminates one of the transitions in terms of the intermediate school. And we just know from the data that student success, again, with less transition, again, you're able to set students up for success and to continue them on a path. There are also some potential choice schools identified in terms of Central and Brandenburg. And so the demographer's report was presented to the committee as well for their consideration for this possibility. Next slide, please. And as we went through, this is some preliminary bond capacity analysis that came from the financial advisor as he was able to present these items. Most of you know that there's a baseline of about $135 million without a tax increase in terms of that capacity. And then you can see what the potential tax increases could be as you increase that bond amount. But basically, you're at about $135 million without a tax increase, and that information was presented to the committee as they continue collecting data and looking at ultimately what the recommendation to you will be as the board. Okay, next slide, please. We also want to, again, thank, again, the directors of departments and leaders and specialists who came in, because we were able to have roundtable discussions basically for choice, for technology, for early childhood, special education, CTE, and extras and co-curriculars. And so one of those experts was seated at each one of the roundtables for that discussion. And not only was it very informative, but we appreciate, again, leadership taking time to come in and be a part of that process and offer that expertise. So lively discussions, very productive discussions, but once again, allowing the data and the consideration that was needed for your committee to be able to come and make a recommendation in all of these important areas with educational delivery. All right. Next slide, please. So ultimately, as we talk about next steps and goals for the committee specifically, you see those icons. In our next meeting, we'll be looking at a tour of Duncanville High School. Again, they want to be able to analyze facility project options, and obviously we'll roll our sleeves up and look at different scenarios, different bond options, what those costs will be, all based on the priorities that are determined by the committee as well. They'll consider the results of the community survey, and in that community survey, it looks like we lost the presentation there, but with the community, you got it there? Okay, there we go. Now we're back. All right, so we'll look at the results of the community survey, which I'm getting ready to show you in just a moment. And I think you'll be pleased with the results, but it gives you a good sense, a good temperature of where the community is now. And then, obviously, the committee will prioritize and rank projects. And again, it's almost a build-a-bond activity based on the priorities and needs with all of the data and all of the information that the committee's been able to receive. Then reach consensus and finalize a recommendation and bring a recommendation to you, to the board, in July. And that's the plan for the next steps and the goals for the committee. But I'd like to share with you now on the next slide the actual results done by Baselis and Associates. This is basically a survey that was done. We had 300 respondents, if you will, and the survey, basically, they were reached by phone, text, or mailbox using the Duncanville ISD registered voter file, and those responses were weighted, and again, it reflects the demographics of likely voters. And so just to give you the examples of some of those results, if we go to the next slide, you see that this was a question that was asked, and it's important to understand as we go through, they were asked specifically in a certain way without information about potential bond projects or amounts. And then by the end of the survey, they were asked after being informed. And the key that you want to see as you look at that graphic is the bottom dark navy blue part in the first positive response. How many strongly agree and how many somewhat agree? You see that, do you have a positive or negative impression of the Duncanville Independent School District? That 62% in terms of positive is very good. It just indicates that there's communication, that there's transparency, that there's support, that there's a very good perspective of the district and what's happening in the district and what's happening for the students for Duncanville ISD. So that was one of the initial questions. If we go to the next slide, please, you'll see here that the questions got a little more specific. On the left side, you have what we would call really the uninformed ballot. That's just basically asking a question with them not having any details or understanding ultimately of the bond. So you see there, they said, well, what about the issuance of a $120 million bond to construct and renovate and equip school buildings and purchase buses? And so you see it was asked in two different ways. Way X said, okay, if the ballot states there would be a property tax increase, or option Y means it will be financed through or with property taxes, just to kind of get a sense of the vernacular and the understanding of what might be presented. And so without any information, you can see in the blue column, the for who were strongly for and somewhat for is 56%. And that's without any information. And then there were 39% against and 5% unsure. But I think the good news is, and what you garner from this data and what you garner from this poll, is that you see for the informed ballot, the same question now later, but they have more specific information. You see that those who are for significantly went up to 63%, and those who were against trended down to 32%. But the number you really want to look at is how many strongly were for. That went up to 40%, you know, and originally it was 25%. So with an informed ballot, that just tells us that it's very important that we educate the community. We obviously let them know what's happening, that there's transparency, that there's updates, that this information is available online and on the website, so that the community is fully informed and everyone is fully educated with the facts and the truths about what's actually happening. Next slide, please. Then it got a little more specific. It looked at, you know, what about approximately $8.7 million for technology, and you can kind of get a sense. And technology sometimes is a tough one, but you can get a sense that it was 55% for, uninformed, 40% against, and you can see the difference again trending in the right direction for the informed ballot on that same one. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, question.
Thank you. It would refer to the next slide also.
Okay.
I don't see anything different in the initial ballot and informed ballot as far as verbiage, but were the questions like this one, question 4 and question 24, was this just in the very beginning of the survey, was this just a blank question with the $6.3 million in bonds, and then later on after you gave them information, did you have the question 24? Because I understand the numbers, but I don't know what happened between Q4 and Q24, and it's the very same verbiage.
Okay. Well, in question 4, that they had a lot less information about the bond specifically, and what do we mean by, for example, on this slide, the natatorium. What do you need to do with the natatorium? What are you going to do, with the natatorium? So it started out very general, but as you progress through each question, you basically were able to garner more specific information so that when you were asked the question again, you were better informed about it. So it would, I think a great example would be like, okay, we're going to take a trip. That was the first question. And then as you get more specific, we're going to take a trip to Hawaii, and this is what we're going to experience in Hawaii. It just got very more specific in terms of informing them what the trip entailed. So if I can use that example. Does that help? From that standpoint?
No, but I'll chew on it tonight after the meeting.
Well,
I understand what the difference, but I'm just saying with the original survey, say the fourth question was the initial ballot, and then later on near the end of the survey, the very same question or proposition was posed, and then you could put another answer, and then that's how you got it.
In somewhat, yes. So this was like a before and after. So in between, specifically on the natatorium, they've asked the first question about would you be supportive of renovations to the district's natatorium? And then they told them that the renovations could potentially be the resurfacing of the pool. And so they listed out the updating of equipment, the improving the aesthetics of the natatorium area. So they gave them some specific things that could be done at the natatorium, and then they came back and asked the same question, same initial question again to see if their response changed in any way, and that did it garner more support. So when you're looking at the strongly, we know that anyone who answers strongly for or against, they're very connected to that decision. They're not likely to change their position. So what we see is that when we inform them about what we specifically would do at the natatorium, hypothetically, then we gained a lot more strong support that they would absolutely stand behind that decision to support that, and we increased that percentage.
Thank you.
It sounded like she just needed to know that Q4 and Q24 did not look like this on the ballot because they look the same on her screen. So now, is that what you were trying to find out, Trustee Fahey?
No, I found out what I needed to know. I did.
Okay.
It was a bunch of the things you put in between the first part of the survey and the last part of the survey.
Yes, well put, and what she said. So, well, almost like a sandwich. I think that's a good analogy. It's like a sandwich. This was all the meat in between the two pieces of bread, if you will. Same bread, top and bottom, but you're building a sandwich. So, yes, ma'am. Okay, so I think with the natatorium, again. Dr. Halaska really, I think, already covered it, but again, this is one where that strongly agree or strongly disagree position is pretty strong, but you still see that there is support. So overall, I think what you'll find in the surveys is that it is positive. We can be cautiously optimistic from that standpoint, but I think the great thing is the trust in the district and district leadership and the things that are happening for student success. It's just indicating that from the voters polled, there is good support from that standpoint. Next slide, please. So as we wind down, there are some more important dates that we want to remember or bring to your attention as we continue to move forward. Obviously, ultimately, we want to get to the July board with the recommendations that come to the Board of Trustees. But in our next meeting, we'll actually roll up our sleeves and continue to get to work with the build-a-bond and any pricing options or scenarios that the district that the committee would ask us to put together for them, so that they can make some informed decisions and some informed recommendations for you. And next slide, please. We'd be happy to address any further questions that you might have. Trustee Fahey?
Thank you for touring the other 5 schools, and then you going to tour the high school. What about the other 12 schools? Will you be going through, or the 12 campuses? We have like 18 total. Will you be going, maybe you going to all 18, but what about the people in your group?
Well, these were the tours that were specifically scheduled in terms of, in terms of priority. But all the other schools, all of the assessment information is already there. But this gave them a sample for them to experience themselves from that standpoint.
Assessed by you already?
Yes, from the, remember the facility assessment
Okay.
that was conducted and turned in May. They basically have access to that information and were presented that in the last meeting in terms of the results of those findings.
And did you choose these 5 schools or the 6 schools, including Duncanville High School, or did the group choose? I'm just curious why these certain. I mean, one was a brand new school, but I mean.
Yeah, well, and part of the reason, for example, on the brand new school for Acton, for example, the reason Acton was toured was to give an example of what it could be and what the standard ultimately could be for the other schools. And then looking at the other schools as well, when we looked at the assessment information and put the information together and looked at the potential in terms of alignment that came from the demographer's report and the financial advisor's report, that's how the schools were selected.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Board.
Okay, we'll move on now to communication from citizens. I'll recognize Dr. Ed Bigby.
Thank you. That's really what I want to say. If I say much more, I'll start bawling. But thank you, Board, Dr. Smith, and all you people for putting up with me. It's been a joy. So, thanks.
We're going to miss you.
Anybody, anything to say? I don't. Thank you, Dr. Bigby. Let's go home. Adjourn.